and the Flatheads have their dwellings. They also are magic workers who usually keep to themselves and allow no one from outside to visit them. I have learned that the Flatheads number about 100 people, men, women and children, while the Skeezers number just 101. What did they quarrel about, and why do they wish to fight one another?" was Ozma's next question. "I cannot tell your Majesty that," said Glinda. "But see here!" cried Dorothy. "It's against the law for anyone but Glinda and the Wizard to work magic in the Land of Oz. So if these two strange people are magic makers, they are breaking the law and ought to be punished." Ozma smiled upon her little friend. "Those who do not know me or my laws," she said, "cannot be expected to obey my laws. If we know nothing of the Skeezers or the Flatheads, it is likely that they know nothing of us." "But they ought to know, Ozma, and we ought to know. Who's going to tell them, and how are we going to make them behave?" "That," returned Ozma, "is what I am now considering. What would you advise, Glinda?" The Sorceress took a little time to consider this question before she made reply. Then she said: "Had you not learned of the existence of the Flatheads and the Skeezers through my Book of Records, you would never have worried about them or their quarrels. So, if you pay no attention to these peoples, you may never hear of them again." "But that wouldn't be right," declared Ozma. "I am ruler of all the Land of Oz, which includes the Gillikin Country, the Quadling Country, the Winkie Country and the Munchkin Country, as well as the Emerald City, and being the Princess of the Fairyland, it is my duty to make all the people, wherever they may be, happy and content, and to settle their disputes and keep them from quarreling. So, while the Skeezers and Flatheads may not know me, or that I am their lawful ruler, I now know that they inhabit my kingdom and are my subjects, so I would not be doing my duty if I kept away from them and allowed them to fight." "That's a fact, Ozma," commented Dorothy. "You've got to go up to the Gillikin Country and make these people behave themselves and make up their quarrels. But how are you going to do it?" "That is what is puzzling me also, your Majesty," said the Sorceress. "It may be dangerous for you to go into those strange countries, where the people are possibly fierce and warlike." "I am not afraid," said Ozma with a smile. "'Tisn't a question of being 'fraid," argued Dorothy. "Of course we know you're a fairy and can't be killed or hurt. We know you've a lot of magic of your own to help you. But, Ozma, dear, in spite of all this, you've been in trouble before, on account of wicked enemies, and it isn't right for the ruler of all Oz to put herself in danger." "Perhaps I shall be in no danger at all," returned Ozma with a little laugh. "You mustn't imagine danger, Dorothy, for one should only imagine nice things, and we do not know that the Skeezers and the Flatheads are wicked people or my enemies. Perhaps they would be good and listen to reason." "Dorothy is right, your Majesty," asserted the Sorceress. "It is true we know nothing of these faraway subjects, except that they intend to fight one another, and have a certain amount of magic power at their command. Such folks do not like to submit to interference, and they are more likely to resent your coming among them than to receive you kindly and graciously, as is your due." "If you had an army to take with you," added Dorothy, "it wouldn't be so bad. But there isn't such a thing as an army in all Oz." "I have one soldier," said Ozma. "Yes, the Soldier with the Green Whiskers, but he's dreadful 'fraid of his gun and never loads it. I'm sure he'd rather run than fight. And one soldier, even if he were brave, couldn't do much against 201 Flatheads and Skeezers." "What, then, my friends, would you suggest?" inquired Ozma. "I advise you to send the Wizard of Oz to them, and let him inform them that it is against the laws of Oz to fight, and that you command them to settle their differences and become friends," proposed Glinda. "Let the Wizard tell them they will be punished if they refuse to obey the commands of the Princess of all the Land of Oz." Ozma shook her head to indicate that the advice was not to her satisfaction. "If they refused, what then?" she asked. "I should be obliged to carry out my threat and punish them, and that would be an unpleasant and difficult thing to do. I am sure it would be better for me to go peacefully, without an army, and armed only with my authority as Ruler, and plead with them to obey me. Then, if they prove obstinate, I could resort to other means to win their obedience." "It's a ticklish thing, any way you look at it," sighed Dorothy. "I'm sorry now that I noticed the record in the Great Book." "But can't you realize, my dear, that I must do my duty now that I am aware of this trouble?" asked Ozma. "I am fully determined to go at once to the Magic Isle of the Skeezers and to the Enchanted Mountain of the Flatheads, and prevent war and strife between their inhabitants. The only question to decide is whether it is better for me to go alone or assemble a party of my friends and loyal supporters to accompany me." "If you go, I want to go too," declared Dorothy. "Whatever happens, it's going to be fun, 'cause all excitement is fun, and I wouldn't miss it for the world." Neither Ozma or Glinda paid any attention to this statement, for they were gravely considering the serious aspect of this proposed adventure. "There are plenty of friends who would like to go with you," said the Sorceress, "but none of them would afford your Majesty any protection in case you were in danger. You are yourself the most powerful fairy in Oz, although both I and the Wizard have more varied arts of magic at our command. However, you have one art that no other in all the world can equal: the art of winning hearts and making people love to bow to your gracious presence. For that reason I believe you can accomplish more good alone than with a large number of subjects in your train." "I believe that also," agreed the Princess. "I shall be quite able to take care of myself, you know, but might not be able to protect others so well. I do not look for opposition, however. I shall speak to these people in kindly words and settle their dispute, whatever it may be, in a just manner." "Aren't you going to take me?" pleaded Dorothy. "You'll need some companion, Ozma." The Princess smiled upon her little friend. "I see no reason why you should not accompany me," was her reply. "Two girls are not very warlike, and they will not suspect us of being on any errand but a kindly and peaceful one. But in order to prevent war and strife between these angry peoples, we must go to them at once. Let us return immediately to the Emerald City and prepare to start on our journey early tomorrow morning." Glinda was not quite satisfied with this plan, but could not think of any better way to meet the problem. She knew that Ozma, with all her gentleness and sweet disposition, was accustomed to abide by any decision she had made, and could not easily be turned from her purpose. Moreover, she could see no great danger to the fairy Ruler of Oz in the undertaking, even though the unknown people she was to visit proved obstinate. But Dorothy was not a fairy. She was a little girl who had come from Kansas to live in the Land of Oz. Dorothy might encounter dangers that to Ozma would be as nothing, but to an Earth child would be very serious. The fact that Dorothy lived in Oz and had been made a princess by her friend Ozma prevented her from being killed or suffering any great bodily pain as long as she lived in that fairyland. She could not grow big, either, and would always remain the same little girl who had come to Oz, unless in some way she left that fairyland or was spirited away from it. But Dorothy was immortal, nevertheless, and might possibly be destroyed, or hidden where none of her friends could ever find her. She could, for instance, be cut into pieces, and the pieces, while still